Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope you're doing very well. I haven't done one of these in a while, but I thought, why don't I talk about more films that I personally think could be great contenders for being in the Criterion Collection. Again, this is my own idea, my own thoughts. I've done a few videos like this in the past, but not many. And I haven't done them in a while, so maybe it's time just for a little bit of a discussion about this. I did make a video recently about directors that I thought were underrepresented in the Criterion Collection, so there might be a little bit of connection with that. And I think because of that video, I was inspired to make this video. So again, these are my own ideas, and it's just a reflection of my own tastes and personality. If you have any of your own thoughts or comments about this topic, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I would love to read about them. And again, I just want to say that for those of you who are new to this channel, and for everyone in general, it's really valuable and such an important thing for me that if it's possible, I'd love to read your comments. Leaving behind comments is one of the things that I really am looking forward to. I really love reading the comments, and so if you have a moment, I would love to hear your thoughts about this particular topic or anything in general. It would be nice to have the opportunity to talk with you and hopefully to have further discussions with you, and we can talk about anything, all things film. So if you have a moment, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And also, if you have a moment, it would be really great if you could subscribe to this channel. There's no pressure. You don't have to if you don't want to, but subscribing to this channel and leaving a comment on this channel are the two best ways that you can help and support this channel, and just to show me just to help me to get to know you better, and also to enable me to, as I said, have discussions with you. So about cinema, which is, I think, the connective tissue that binds us all, so to speak. So yes, so subscribing to this channel and leaving comments are the two best ways that you can help me. So if you are able to do so, it would be really appreciated. So in any event, my friends, with that in mind, let me now just mention a few titles that I think personally could be in the Criterion Collection. It would be great to see them in the Criterion Collection. So films that I would like to see in the Criterion Collection for June 2019. So the first one is a film by a filmmaker that is already in the Criterion Collection. We have Women in Love by Ken Russell, and I've mentioned many times it would be great to see The Devils, which is, I think, a supreme masterpiece in British cinema, in cinema in general. It's a film that I think should be seen by as many people as possible in its complete form. But there's always room for more Russell. There's always room for more Ken Russell. So what about this? Altered States. Altered States. My goodness. This is a great film. There are a lot of questions here. There are a lot of difficult moments here. There are a lot of issues here, of course, but oh boy, this would be great. And to have a Criterion release of this, to talk about its production history, which is very, I think, there's a story there to be told, to talk about other aspects of the production, the special effects, the writing, etc. I think it would just be a wonderful, complete package for Criterion Altered States, and Ken Russell. And it's a very interesting film in the filmography of Ken Russell, which is already very interesting to begin with. Of course, it doesn't have to be Altered States. It can be any other film by Ken Russell, I think. Oh, gosh. But wouldn't it be great to have more Ken Russell in the Criterion Collection? And I don't know, just an example more than anything else, perhaps, Altered States for your consideration. Next is a film that this would be so great to have. And actually, I think there are some rumors that this could be coming into the collection, although I'm not sure exactly, so don't take my word for it. But never say never. And I mention this because our dear friend, Weil Kyrie, who had a great comment the other day, was mentioning this film, Los Olvidados. Los Olvidados. This is the Buñuel film, Louis Buñuel. And this is a DVD that I have, but it's not the best DVD in the world, and still it's such a powerful film. This packs a punch. My goodness, does it do so and then some. So it's a classic film. It's, I think, one of the great masterpieces that is, I think, for a lot of people still yet to be discovered. And I think if it were discovered in a way that was presented in a fashion that Criterion is so used to presenting great films, then this would be, I think, one of those landmark releases, or potentially could be one of the great landmark releases by the Criterion Collection, bar none. So Los Olvidados, the film, yes, the Louis Buñuel masterpiece. This would be a great Criterion Collection release. Fingers crossed, of course. So again, for your consideration. Next is the film, or it's a documentary by the very famous poet and intellectual, who is unfortunately no longer with us. She died quite young, but from Iran, and her name is Farrokh Farrokhzad. So Farrokh Farrokhzad. So Farrokhzad's work here is called The House is Black. So Farrokhzad's The House is Black. So Farrokhzad does something with this documentary that is, I think, quite shattering. She takes elements of poetry and the Bible, and she merges them with stark images of a particular group of people in this society. And it's quite an experience. It's a short documentary. It's not that long, but it's very harrowing, unforgettable, and quite a complex work on many facets. So The House is Black by Farrokh Farrokhzad. So it would be wonderful if this could be released in the Criterion Collection. This particular DVD is Facets Video, and this Facets Video, thank goodness for Facets Video, because they have released a lot of great stuff, and it's fantastic that this film has been made available on this Facets DVD. But I think maybe if there was more, if there was a release that was that maybe had a restored print or something, or had packed commentaries or supplements about Farrokhzad and about her poetry and about her work and her life. It would be just a complete package of a filmmaker and of an artist that deserves so much attention. I mean, we're getting, I think, a lot. It's been happening for quite a while now. Of course, is Iranian cinema, the cinema of Iran, becoming more and more in the forefront of world cinema, and becoming the topic of great conversations. Not least, of course, this is occurring also in the Criterion Collection now, and also other places like Arrow and the like. So it's really wonderful. But it would be so nice to see Farrokhzad's name be included in those conversations as well. I'm sure she is, but it would be nice to see more of that. And so The House is Black would be just a phenomenal inclusion into the Criterion Collection. Again, fingers crossed. And it is possible, I think, to see The House is Black on, if you looked hard enough online, perhaps you can find it. But I think all the versions I've been able to see, I have to rely on English subtitles, and the subtitles, I think, are burned onto the print. And so it's that white kind of subtitling color. And sometimes when you have white subtitling on a black and white film, it's sometimes difficult to see all of the words. And so it would be nice to have maybe subtitling for those of us like myself who need to rely on subtitling in order to understand what's being said, because there is a lot of narration in this work. So yes, in any event, it would be so great to see this introduced into the Criterion Collection. Farrokhzad's The House is Black, for your consideration. Next is a Japanese film from 1978. Now, this is a film that's what's known as an Art Theater Guild film, an ATG film, which is this company in Japan that was, in essence, supporting and cultivating Japanese independent cinema, or cinema from independent voices outside of the major studios, at least in a general sense. Although there were some relationships with major studios, but in essence, ATG films are known as being, generally speaking, independent films from the late 1960s, 70s, and 80s Japan. And so this is an ATG film from 1978. It's called Sado, which I think is translated into third base, as in baseball, third base. So Sado. And this is directed by Yoichi Higashi, and it's written by Shuji Terayama. So very interesting work. And this is 1978, and I understand that this work, Sado, was #1 in the Kinema Junpo poll for best films from Japan 1978. So this is #1, I believe. Yes. And I think for good reason, because this is such a hard, bleak, devastating, and also at the same time poetic and optimistic work. Wow, this is a profoundly moving work, so profound. I am just devastated to the core every time I see this film. It is rough. It is quite. It's quite tough in some places, and also it's very tender and filled with a lot of heart. And so it would be wonderful to see Sado it would be wonderful to see this film released in some form that I think is English friendly. Now, I'm not sure to what extent this is available in English. It could be, but I don't know. This is a Japanese Blu-ray, and this Blu-ray is not equipped with any kind of English support whatsoever. So for those of you who are interested in watching this film, this Blu-ray will not help if you are in need of English support. I'm not sure what the availability of this film is elsewhere, but in any event, it would be so wonderful to see ATG films in the Criterion Collection. But in particular, it would be great to see this film, Sado, as a kind of middle period or middle to late period ATG film from the late 70s. That is just a brilliant film. I mean, this film and other ATG films like it, I think don't get a lot of attention outside of Japan, and I think for good reason, because they're not usually made available outside of Japan. But it's such a core moment in Japanese cinema, this kind of undercurrent of independent cinema outside of these big studios. During the 60s and late 60s and early and all the way through the 70s, Sado being one of them. So I would really love to see more films from this period introduced outside of Japan in English-friendly releases. So it would be great to see Sado in the Criterion Collection. Okay, fingers crossed, of course, but who knows? It doesn't hurt to dream. So, again, Sado for your consideration from 1978. Next is a film from 1976. So it's a film that I think has a lot of clout, it has a very profoundly awesome reputation in many senses of that word. And I'm talking about this film, Taxi Driver. So Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese, Taxi Driver. Now, Taxi Driver was released as a Criterion Laserdisc. So let's see here. Yep. There you go. So here is Taxi Driver on one of the Laserdisc releases. There are actually a number of Laserdisc releases from the Criterion Collection of Taxi Driver. But, so in other words, there is precedent, if you will, of Taxi Driver being in the Criterion Collection, albeit in Laserdisc form. Still, there is this connection. Also, there are connections with Scorsese's work in general, with the current Criterion Collection. For example, The Last Temptation of Christ, The Age of Innocence. So, right, and of course it's Taxi Driver, which is considered by many to be one of the greatest films ever made. Leave it to you personally to consider whether or not that is true for you. But for me, anyway, it's certainly in the conversation, because this is, I think, a wild. It's a very violent film. But it's a film that you can feel the soul of these individuals that are making this film. You can feel their personalities and their concerns just bubbling to the surface, like some kind of some kind of sort of bursting of energy. And whether that energy be positive energy or negative energy, I'll leave that up to you to decide. But it feels like such an explosion of a lot of things. And so it would be great to see Taxi Driver in the Criterion Collection. Of course it would. It would just be phenomenal to see this in the Criterion Collection. And it would be a fantastic seller, I'm sure. It would be great to see. Man, I really should talk about this film in detail one of these days. I really would love to. Again, it is a very intense work, very, very violent, and quite disturbing in many places, but also in other places very funny. And also quite tender. Although I must admit, I think the moments of tenderness are then overshadowed by other seemingly contradictory elements that form this unease that permeates the entire work in a way that drives the film forward to its inevitable conclusion. So anyway, Taxi Driver, Criterion Collection. My goodness, that would be such a great day. Anyway, for your consideration, Taxi Driver for the Criterion Collection. Next, it's June 2019, and so I think the recent release of Blue Velvet in the Criterion Collection means that David Lynch is in the air, right? There is always music in the air, and at least with Criterion, there is always David Lynch in the air. And indeed, David Lynch is in the air, and the Blue Velvet release is fantastic. There are other David Lynch works in the Criterion Collection at the moment: Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, Mulholland Drive, Eraserhead, and also some of the short works by David Lynch that are included on the Eraserhead disc. There's also Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me's The Missing Pieces, so that's very interesting. But it would always be great to see more David Lynch. Now, I know a lot of people are hoping for his other works like like The Elephant Man, or The Straight Story, or Inland Empire, Lost Highway. I would actually love to see, I don't know if it'll ever happen, I'm not holding my breath, but it would be great to see something like On the Air. Now, these are the VHS tapes from Japan that I have of On the Air, David Lynch and Mark Frost, On the Air. That's Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. Now, I don't know how accessible these are. Maybe On the Air is readily available through online means. I'm not sure. I think there's a Laserdisc of this as well, but these are the VHS tapes that I have, and these I bought used at a fairly cheap price on an online auction here in Japan. But this would be great to have in a kind of full release, and there's already a kind of relationship between the Criterion Collection and David Lynch, so it would be nice to see On the Air in some form, whether it be its own individual release or maybe as a supplement to another David Lynch film. Who knows? My Japanese Blu-ray of Lost Highway has a DVD disc of Dumbland as its own separate supplement, so maybe this could be its own disc on a David Lynch film release from the Criterion Collection. Maybe Inland Empire, and on a second disc, the entire season of On the Air. I don't know, that would be interesting. Or if we're talking about other David Lynch works, Hotel Room, which is also here, which is this is the VHS tape. So maybe this could be another supplement on the Inland Empire release of the Criterion Collection, if ever that were to happen. Fingers crossed, knock on wood. So anyway, David Lynch for your consideration. Next is, I haven't seen the film Godzilla King of the Monsters, the Hollywood Godzilla film, and I don't know if I'll be able to go to the theater to see it in time, but Godzilla is also in the air, and I know of the film Godzilla, the first Godzilla film, which is in the Criterion Collection right now. There are, of course, many Godzilla films, in the so-called Showa era, Heisei era, and they plentiful, and so many, and perhaps too many to keep track of. It would be great, of course, to see a huge Godzilla set a la the Zatoichi box set. That would be just stunning. Stunning. It would be, I don't know, it would be like, gosh, I don't know, I might be saying too much, but it would almost be like, well, I don't want to say I don't want to say that. I think I was going to say it would almost be like finding the lost footage of the Magnificent Ambersons, but I don't think I could go quite so far. But it still would be very important to me, let me put it that way, to see a box set of Godzilla films in the Criterion Collection. That would be really fantastic, actually. Oh yeah, that would be fantastic. But even if that couldn't happen, I would still be happy with one or two other Godzilla films in the Criterion Collection. It'd be really nice. So if we're going to go with Godzilla, the first Godzilla, and for those of you who know Godzilla, you know that it's a very serious film. It's not campy. It's quite dark in its tone. As the Godzilla films progressed through the Showa period, up from the 50s through the 60s and up through the mid-70s, you had a varying degree of tone, and mostly veering towards the territory of camp and comedy and lightheartedness. Don't get me wrong, those films I think are just wonderful, really lovely, and thus makes the series very accessible, I think, to a younger audience, children. So, and I think that's wonderful. But if one wanted to see a kind of thematic link of Godzilla films, starting with the first film, which is already in the Criterion Collection, then I could envision quite easily having a film like Godzilla 1984 in the Criterion Collection, as this is an almost direct sequel, if you will, to the first Godzilla film. And so it feels like a natural continuation. It's also, in the parlance of today, a sort of soft reboot. And it also has two versions. There's the Japanese version, and then there's the Americanized version with Raymond Burr as Steve Martin, although by this time he was never referred to by his name, Steve Martin, because of similarities with the actor Steve Martin. And there's lots of references to Dr. Pepper and all that, which I think are a little bit inappropriate, but that's this conversation for another day. But in any event, this release would be a nice mirrored release with the earlier Criterion Godzilla Blu-ray. So this would be a nice through line. And if you wanted to go further with the through line, I would even suggest then, after this release, you would release this film, Shin Godzilla. Shin Godzilla on the Criterion Collection would be beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. If you haven't seen Shin Godzilla, this speaks so poignantly and so directly towards the recent Tohoku earthquake and Fukushima nuclear plant disaster that befell Japan. And it's still something that is a very dark moment in recent Japanese history. And it's an issue that is unfortunately ongoing in a lot of ways. And this film is a direct sort of metaphor, if you will, for that terrible disaster. And therefore, it's a work that I think resonates with me in particular with such fierceness. And it's very scary in that regard, and therefore it creates this lovely thematic through line from the first Godzilla through Godzilla, the 1984, 1985 versions, and then here, Shin Godzilla. So this would be a nice cycle of films to have in the Criterion Collection if it were impossible to have all the Godzilla films included in some lovely box set. Anyway, for your consideration, some iteration of releases of the Toho Godzilla films. Next one is a film by the filmmaker Susumu Hani. Susumu Hani, that's S-U-S-U-M-U, and his last name is H-A-N-I. Again, Susumu Hani. This is a Japanese filmmaker, and he is a contemporary of Shohei Imamura and Oshima and that generation of filmmakers. But I don't think he is as well known outside of Japan as those filmmakers. And it's a shame because Susumu Hani's works are, simply put, incredibly profound and experimental very moving and just deep, resonant. And they speak, I think his films speak to me on a more direct level than Oshima's works. And I say that being a great admirer, a huge admirer of Oshima's films. I love his films, don't get me wrong. But for whatever reason, Hani's works just speak to me because they deal with certain themes, or many of them do anyway, deal with certain themes of intimacy between among or between people in couples, and so and the drama that plays out accordingly. And an example of that is this film here, which is called Kanojo to Kare, which is translated into, I think, she and he, or him and, or her and him, or she and he. But this is from 1963. Yes, 1963, and it stars the great Japanese actress Sachiko Hidari. So please remember this name, Susumu Hani, and please remember the name Sachiko Hidari. Sachiko Hidari is such an important Japanese actor, and she has been in a lot of films, but her performance here in the Susumu Hani work is, simply put, masterful, genius. And so it would be so great to see Susumu Hani works in some form in the Criterion Collection. I don't know what that would mean, but it would be great to see them in some form. An Eclipse DVD box set would be beautiful. Individual releases on Blu-rays would be beautiful. I don't think they're available on the Criterion Channel streaming service, but even on that alone would be beautiful. The more exposure that his films receive with English support, I think the better off we all would be, and the happier I would feel, because his films are so important to me. They mean so much to me. So anyway, the works of Susumu Hani, please remember that name, Susumu Hani, and please remember the name of Sachiko Hidari, again, for your consideration. Speaking of Sachiko Hidari, I'd like to mention this film at the end here, and then call it a day. So Sachiko Hidari, as I mentioned, is Japanese actress, very prominent actress, and she is such a major figure in the acting world in Japan. But she also gained prominence as a director. Now, Japanese films and female directors, I think, is one of those issues that it's very peculiar in Japanese cinema. In, let's say, the early 20th century Japanese cinema, and then the late 20th century Japanese cinema landscape. We don't see, we see almost no Japanese filmmakers who are female, which is very peculiar, and it's something that is an issue, I think, when talking about Japanese cinema, and it has to be addressed. And so it's amazing, therefore, to think that we have this film, which is called Toi Ippon no Michi, which is translated into, I think, The Far Road, or the Far Long Road, or something like that. This is a film that is directed by Sachiko Hidari, so the actress who appeared in the Susumu Hani film here. She directs this film, and this is quite a memorable drama, and it's really it's a film that I think needs to be seen, because it works so well, and so it's so genuine, and such a moving watch, that I think it would be such a great topic of discussion were it to be released on a label, let's say the Criterion Collection. Oh my gosh, this would be such a great film to have in the Criterion Collection. Sachiko Hidari's directed film, The Far Road. Now, I understand that I don't think she has, please correct me if I'm wrong, but she doesn't have that large of a filmography as a director, unfortunately. This film also is not available on a DVD here in Japan. It's only available on this used VHS tape, which is what I have. And so there would be great incentive, I think, to have this released on a Criterion label, because it would just be historic. It would be absolutely historic. And it's in need of attention. It's in such need of attention. This film needs to be seen because right at its very core, it is such a good film. So anyway, Sachiko Hidari's work that she directed, called Toi Ippon no Michi, The Far Road, it would be so great to have this in the Criterion Collection. Oh, this would be so great to have in the Criterion Collection. But anyway, yes, as I said earlier, it is better to dream than not to. So for your consideration, my friends, yes, The Far Road, or Toi Ippon no Michi. Okay, my friends, let me end it there. And there are many, many more that I could mention, but let me just stop there. I'll maybe make another video like this in the future, just to keep this conversation going, because I think it's interesting. It's nice to make these videos because it helps me to really think about other films that I think are worth mentioning that usually don't get as much attention that they otherwise should, because again, cinema is such a vast landscape, and there are so many unexplored territories and corners that it makes this journey such a fun and endless one, and filled with possibilities. The possibilities are limitless. So if you have any ideas, if you have any thoughts or comments about these or any other works that you think might be interesting to see in the Criterion Collection, I would love to hear about them. And who knows, maybe our dreams can indeed come true. So until we meet again, my friends, please be happy and healthy and well. And please, please, please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Until we see each other again. Cheers.